Pujya Shankaracharya-ji, Bhikkhu-ji, Swamiji, dear Bruce Lipton, Sadhvi Bhagwati, dear friends who come from all around the world for this International Festival of Yoga. Of course, yoga just means joining, and we are actually one with the earth. Just that 200 years ago, some not so smart men, thinking they were smart, decided to create a paradigm, a mechanistic paradigm, to say not only are we separate from the earth, but we are masters and conquerors and owners. And I really feel the yoga of today, the yoga of living, has to be to transcend that 200 years pollution of the mind. That's what His Holiness was talking about in terms of consciousness. I am trained in quantum theory, which also teaches us that everything is connected. That the world is not made of hard billiard balls that you move by force. That the world is potential. And as we sit on the banks of Mother Ganga, my mind goes back to my childhood. I learned swimming in this beautiful river. I'm born in Doon Valley. But about 45 years ago, the women of Garhwal recognized the connections between the forests and the soil and the water, and engaged in what to me is one of the most inspiring spiritual acts of saying we're going to hug the trees. We'll join our bodies with the body of the tree, so that if you try and kill the tree, you will first have to kill us. That's where I learned my ecological activism. And I still practice that philosophy of the deepest love to come in the way of the worst, most brutal violence. And that really is the issue for me of a spiritual economics. Because over time, the worst violence to life on earth, to most human beings, to ourselves, is coming from the way we define what an economy is. The term economy comes from the same roots as the term ecology. Oikos means home, this beautiful earth. Not just our mother, but our common home, which we inhabit with the birds and the animals and the rivers and the mountains, who are our extended family. That's why we talk of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the earth as a family. And my entire philosophy, including of democracy, of economics, is based on that one basic thought, that we are one extended family of life. So the science of understanding our home is called ecology, and the management of the home is called economy. And yet today it has become the discipline for mismanaging our home. Since the earth is interconnected and we are part of the earth, and the earth is divine, you know, we have a very famous Ishopanishad which says the universe is made for all of creation, and enjoy the fruits without greed. And this is where Gandhi got his inspiration, and Tagore got his inspiration, and all our thinkers got their inspiration to put this in the capsule, that the earth has enough for everyone's needs, but not for a few people's greed. Now, a few people's greed, let me just mention the numbers. A few years ago, people used to talk about a 1%. 6 years ago, 388 men started to control half the wealth of this planet. Last year, it had dropped to 62, which was already so small. It's just the front rows in this hall. Now, it's 8. controlling half the wealth of the world, the first row out here. Now, that is a symptom of violence. How could this beautiful, generous earth, which creates so much wealth, and our amazing humanity, which has the capacity to create perennial economies so that no being is deprived of their food, of their water, of their air, of their home, of their habitat. How could it be that 8 people are making all the decisions about what happens to the earth and the future of humanity? And that's why, for me, addressing the economic question as a spiritual question has become a deep imperative. Let's just think of some of the key terms that guide the way we talk about the economy. One important word is capital. The word capital used to mean in Latin just the heads of cattle. So that we call it Pashudan. You have them roaming around the ashram here all the time. I love it. When people say, what's the best thing about Rishikesh? I say, the cows still roam free. This is their land. So, dhan as the wealth, the real wealth, was then transformed to money. But money was a shortcut. It was a means of exchange. Instead of carrying sacks of wheat, I would give you a promise, and that's all. The money in our pockets. If you notice, what does it say? It says, I promise to pay the bearer. I promise to pay the bearer. This is not worth anything. It's a piece of paper. What the value is the promise behind it. And the promise is related to the real world of the earth's gifts and our efforts. The word capital, over time, started to get interpreted as existing in and of itself. And then an entire edifice was built to make it look like this fiction called capital creates. I'm not going to go into too much detail about assumptions of the illusion of the power of creation of capital. A construction cannot create. The earth creates. We create. Of course, the divine is a creative force that keeps this entire world going. And as Swamiji talked about, the fact that all of creation is moving with that amazing creativity. A lot of people think that the fact that there's a lot of richness in northern countries comes from the fact that they were creative through capital and technology. Forget that 200, 300 years of gold from Latin America, spices and textiles from India were transferred through brute force. For 2 centuries, all it was a war. And it's built into the structure of how we see the economy. The economy has become war. It used to mean taking care of ourselves and our homes and each other and our communities. Now it is, how can you do 2 things? First, unleash the worst instruments of violence, but second, turn the instruments into a measure of our humanity. We talk about Purusharth, and we differentiate it from Arth and Kam. Purusharth is a meta-level, dharmic decision about the values through which we live. So I have a pen, and I can write nonsense, or I can write with consciousness. The pen doesn't decide that. The pen is a mere instrument, just as much as that piece of promise in my wallet does not define an end. And I think we are going through this huge global hallucination where means which should enhance the welfare of all beings have been reduced to the guiding religion of our times. We are treating technology as a religion. I know this because every time any field, whether it's a large dam, they're trying to build 500 dams on this beautiful river upstream from here. You can see what's happened with the barrage. There's no water flowing after the barrage. But 500 dams, there won't be a river. Do a lot of work on the seeds. I do a lot of work on food. And on every level where a technology violates either the soil or the seed or the biodiversity or the quality of our food, the assumption is you can just say the word technology and everyone should shut up. Now, these issues of seed, are they an expression of creation and our co-creation with the earth, or are they technology is actually in courts right now? I'm dealing with cases in India where Monsanto claims they invented the seed, and I also, when I go back to the history of how GMOs, genetically engineered organisms, came into the world, largely so seeds could be patented. I often explain the phenomena as the corporations, and now there are 3 of them left, saying, God move over. GMO is God move over. We are the creators. We are the creators. I'll just give you 2 simple examples, really right now in legal issues. So Monsanto took huge royalties from our farmers, even though we had worked 20 years ago, 25 years ago, to not allow patenting of seed on the basis of the ethics of being part of the earth family. That other beings are not your invention, they're your family. So plants and animals cannot be treated as inventions in Indian law. Therefore, royalty collection is illegal. But Monsanto was collecting royalty, increased the price of seed 80,000%. Farmers got into debt, they were driven to suicide. Just this morning, there's news how in Punjab, in 3 districts, the very high level of farmer suicides. Those 3 districts are the areas where Monsanto's GMO cotton grows. So when the prices are that high, of course farmers will get into debt. Well, finally the government started to take action, started to regulate the price of seed. And Monsanto says in the courts, a BT cotton is not a seed. It's not a cotton, it's a technology. So you cannot govern us under any law of this land because it's a technology. I've done an amicus intervention in Argentinian courts where they're also challenging the issue of collecting royalties, and there it's about Roundup Ready soya, and they're saying a Roundup Ready soya is not a soya. It's not a plant, it's a technology. So you've taken a means, and instead of assessing it as a means, you've taken it to the level of being an end which does not get evaluated but dictates terms to humanity on how to live. The second means that we have elevated to the highest ends is money. And it's the worship of money that has created the situation where 8 men today, probably 5 men next year, and we don't know how many, a few years down the line, will say, we will make the laws, we will make the policies, we will own the water of the Ganga. I had to fight a very long struggle to defend the sanctity and integrity of the Ganga because there was a huge attempt at privatization. To sell the Ganga to Delhi, we stopped it, we stopped it. And I took a little, we keep the Ganga Jal in copper because copper is a beautiful metal, it cleanses. And I gave this little thing, we've been fighting this sort of World Bank project. And when the World Bank chief came to Delhi, he wanted to meet me. I took women with me, but I also took this little Ganga Jal. And after the discussion on the technicalities, etc., when I was leaving, I left the Ganga Jal with him. And I said, I want you to have it next to your bed, so that every morning when you get up and every night when you go to sleep, you will remember that for us, the Ganga is a mother, she's not for sale. Now, one of the ways in which this worship of money has been possible is by creating another fiction, where groups of people who are money makers get together and become a corporation. The first corporation created was East India Company to basically take over India through brute force. We are going to do something very beautiful this year. It's 100 years of Gandhi having said no to the forced cultivation of indigo, the blue dye, for the textile industry in England. Farmers were not able to cultivate crops. It was a slavery. All of the cotton cultivation of the world was based on slavery. And Gandhi joined the peasants and said, we will not grow indigo. It's 100 years since that Satyagraha, force of truth. That's what Satyagraha means. So we're doing a Satyagraha Yatra from the place where 1857 people of India drove out the East India Company. The first corporation was then closed down, the first time, beginning in uprising in Meerut. 100 years of Gandhi's Champaran Satyagraha, and 30 years since I dedicated my life to the sacred seed. And with the sacred seed, the sacredness of all species that depend on the seed, including the human species, as well as the web of life that the seed maintains. When our seeds are open pollinated and we do organic farming, we are giving food to the pollinators. When our seed is genetically engineered and when we do chemical farming and we coat the seeds with neonicotinoids, the bees die, the pollinators die. There are now attempts to assess the contribution of the pollinators. The United Nations has come up with a figure of 680 billion. We've done an externality of chemical farming. What's the economics of chemical farming? The externalities for India just for farmer suicides and the destruction of soil, of water, of contamination, just that is $1.2 trillion annually. That's as much as the GDP. Now, if you add another dimension, it's very funny, I saw an article today, India's getting healthier. I'm saying, well, the cancer rates are exploding. Just last week, we've lost 3 friends to cancer. In that same last week, 3 friends have had strokes and heart attacks. So if you take diabetes, you take what they call the non-communicable chronic diseases, India is becoming an epicenter. And the world rates are exploding. I know each of you does yoga because of your consciousness of wanting to live healthy lives yourself and share the knowledge of living healthy lives for others. But a big part of what's causing ill health is the way we grow our food with chemicals and the way we process it with chemicals and additives. Just with India and the cost of treatment of cancer and diabetes and hypertension and cardiac problems, I would say we are building a disease burden of 2 trillion annually. And that's only India. You add the world, the externalities of the system are so much bigger than what we count as the economy. But when we recognize that our health is part of our well-being, that the health of the pollinators, the health of the soil is part of the economy, we realize we are actually building a diseconomy. And my increasing feeling is the problem with materialism is it can't take care of the material world even. It's failing as a material project. It's failing to take care of the planet, it's failing to take care of our bodies. It's failing to take care of society. And that is why we have new initiatives, Drona has come with me. He's the coordinator of Navdanya, and he's the one who will be taking care of you all who will come for the retreat. And we will take all these issues deeper, and you'll realize how many beautiful possibilities of alternatives there are. Through biodiversity, through creation, you will, while you're there, celebrate Holi with natural colors. We are using toxic colors for Holi, when there's so many plants that give us natural colors, and you'll get to make your own colors and work with the plants that give these natural colors. Everything we need can come to us through non-violence. Everything we need can allow us to act in service of the earth. For 30 years, we've been saving seeds through Navdanya. We've been growing organic food. We can feed 2 times India's population with diversity and nourishing food. 2 times the world population by not destroying biodiversity, the soil, the water. All we have to do is, as His Holiness said, be totally dedicated to the reason why we are put on earth, to take care of life on earth. Our own lives, our own consciousness, but the life of other beings too. There is another new problem emerging about the carelessness of this material world, our relationship with the material world, which is not just material, it is sacred. The first is financialization. This piece of money says, I promise to pay the bearer an equivalent of 2,000 rupees. Now this goes into Wall Street, and Wall Street can multiply it many-fold magically through derivatives and securities and all kinds of gambling and exchange trading funds, and I can't even keep up with it, frankly. But all we know is there's 70 times more financial wealth in the world than real resources. But that's greedy money, and it's hungry money, and then it wants all the land and all the rivers and all the food and all your bodies. You know, our bodies themselves have become a major commodity. Our minds have become a commodity. Our relationships have become a commodity, you know. I always say, you know, we used to have friends, I'd talk to you, I'd chat with you, I'd come here to the ashram, have a chat with Sadhvi Bhagwati. But if I was doing this on Facebook, my relationships are a commodity. Facebook friends are for sale. Huge money. And then there's digitalization, one level higher of alienation from our role in this world. So my favorite company, Monsanto, now is getting into buying Silicon Valley firms to put surveillance drones in the air, software for spying in your tractor. So why should farming, the ultimate expression of love for the earth, service to the seed and to the soil, be reduced to a military operation of spying? Is that how we want to grow the food that will nourish our bodies, and not just our bodies, our minds? I'm doing a lot of work on the relationship between food and health, and Ayurveda always knew this, yoga always knew this, that the state of our mind and the state of our body and how we live and what we eat are not separable. You can't stuff yourself with poison and expect a healthy body. You can't stuff yourself with glyphosate and Roundup and GMOs, which is killing the bacteria in our gut, which is then responsible for the neurotransmitters that make our brains function properly, and not be surprised that rates of autism and Alzheimer's and other neurological problems are exploding. So the earth is where we have to begin, building spiritual economies. And over the last 45 years, it's spirituality that has led me to my activism and my intellectual world. We built an economic system which is violent but based on illusions, and has led to that concentration, which is becoming a serious problem for those of you who come from the United States, you've seen an election that's no more about democracy. You know, it's for sale. It's for sale. And now everyone's making an effort on how do you reclaim human freedom, not to be irresponsible, but human freedom to be able to live responsibility on this earth and in society and community. That role of democracy is vital if we are going to have a future of our species on this planet. So what are the transitions we need to make? We need to move from a violent economy to economies of peace, to consciousness of real beings who are our family, from these fictions of GDP, growth. You know, we work with government of Bhutan, and in fact, Drona comes from Bhutan and also works with the GNH Center. Bhutan evolved gross national happiness and well-being and said we will not calculate GDP and GNP, which are just numbers of cooking up figures. You know, UK was having such low GDP, they said, oh, let's count prostitution and drug addiction in our growth, and we can increase it annually by 10 billion pounds. So every disease created by a civilization in decay becomes growth. Consumerism is vital to keep that destructive machine together. Simplicity is our peaceful revolution. As Gandhi said, there's enough on this planet for everyone's needs, but not for a few people's greeds. We've got to realize that instruments and means are instruments and means, and we do need the higher consciousness to make decisions about how these instruments get used, or whether they get used. Which are the instruments that we should not even be using? Should we be having nuclear arsenals? Should we be deploying GMOs which don't produce more food? We are, at the one hand, living in very troubled times. And on the other hand, we have been given this opportunity to take all the teachings of the best of human societies and put them to the service of living on this planet as one Earth family on one planet and one humanity, interconnected through our humanity, not divided through inhumanity. Thank you.